When do you know whether you should continue investing your time into building your directory and when you should just pivot or abandon the entire project as a whole? Well, I built directories that I've ended up abandoning within the first month of deploying because just the traffic, the indexation just wasn't there. I could tell this just wasn't going to lead to success. But I've also built directories that were explosive with growth and had really valuable website traffic, but I still ended up abandoning it because the monetization angle was just too challenging. So I want to cover some green flags that I look for that tell me to continue building, that there is potential with the directory that I built. And I also want to cover some red flags that kind of tell me to pause, take a step back, pivot, or just abandon the project entirely. I know a lot of people in the Ship Your Directory community, as well as people watching this video, have built a directory and tasted small wins. Maybe it's getting your website indexed really quickly or getting your first 1,000 visitors to your directory, but it's not at the point where you're satisfied with it and you're kind of wondering, well, what should I do? Should I continue trying to build this? And if so, what do I even do to move the needle? So towards the end, I want to talk about some actionable things that we can all do for like 30 minutes a day that would probably benefit our SEO or our monetization angle a lot better, and ultimately just give us more data and figure out what are people willing to spend money on within our niche. So let's start with the green flags. These are signs that you should continue building because there's some promise or potential in the niche that you're building in. And I pulled up a few different Google Search Console accounts for my most recent website, as well as a few different directories that I built, so we can kind of take a look at some of my own projects. But the first green flag is early indexation. And this is a good example. Whitescreen.ai just talked about this last week, but you can see I just submitted my sitemap on November 21st. This was roughly 10 days ago, and there's not much traffic going on here, but if we do go over to the pages, we can see that it is indexed. At least half of the website pages seem to be indexed. I may have to fix some stuff here. This is a really good sign because I've built in other niches before, one in tree service, where it took like 2 to 3 months to index. And one of the causes that I learned that could lead to slow indexing is if you're building in a niche where there's just a lot of competition, meaning there's just so many similar pages on the internet already, and your website doesn't do a great job at differentiating yourself, that Google is not really incentivized to go and crawl and index your website because there's so many others that are serving the exact same purpose. So this is a good sign from a 10-day-old website. And that brings me to the second green flag that tells me I should keep on going, which is just getting traffic early. And I look at Google Search Console because this is showing me the traffic that I'm getting from organic SEO. If I look at Google Analytics, then it starts to collect all the traffic sources from social media, maybe if I mention it in a newsletter or a video like this. So this is a really obvious sign. In the case of Whitescreen.ai, it's only 10 days old or so, so this is really, really early. And the reason I say that is because if we look at another directory here, scratchanddentlocator.com, we can see when I published this in August 17th of this year, I was pretty quick to get traffic and it was great. We can see just 2 weeks later, towards the end of August, I was on pace to hit around 1,000 monthly visitors. So it was a really solid growth trajectory. With that said, this is looking pretty flat for the next couple months. You know, I do grow a little bit, right? By October, I'm getting roughly 1,800, 2,000 projected monthly visitors, but it wasn't until a few months in, just letting my website marinate and just slowly start to crawl up on the rankings, again, with no backlinks, just good on-page SEO, that I started to see some more significant spikes. And now we're all the way here. Late November, there's some holiday dips, but I am on pace to get roughly 6,000 to 7,000 monthly visitors just from the organic SEO. This doesn't even include other forms of traffic. This trend of early traffic is pretty much consistent with a lot of directories that I build. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be a grand slam and that I necessarily work on it for sure going to the future. Take a look at comicbookstores.co. This is a directory that I built in one of my full build out videos, but I really didn't start super hot, but at least I was indexed and getting a little bit of traffic. But for this website, it wasn't until 3 months in, towards around September, that I started hitting more consistent days where I'm getting 20 visitors a day. And it's even still now not getting too much traffic. And so this is a sign that there's probably some potential, but I need to start to build backlinks or take extra action, which we'll talk about later in this video. So the third green flag that I look for is just organic inbound leads coming into your email inbox. And this is one that I got from portapottymatch.com, which is currently down because I didn't renew the SSL certificate. We can see that they're trying to rent a trailer, which is a luxury restroom trailer. So at least $1,000 to $2,000 a day. So this is a pretty valuable lead. And this wasn't the only one that came in. I got bigger ones than this. I got the New Mexico State Fair $20,000 lead that came into this inbox. And if you do remember me talking about this directory directory. This has lorem ipsum on the front page. So it was not well built, but this was a sign that I should probably spend more time building out a proper porta-potty directory. Hopefully I can rebuild this with AI coding tools in early 2026 and make a video around it. But this is a great sign. If you think about how you would monetize a lead generation directory, the only thing that really matters is whether or not you're able to get leads and pass them off to businesses. That's what this is. And so even though there wasn't that much traffic going to this directory, maybe I think like 200 people a month were coming to this directory, very, very low. These are the types of signs that give me that momentum to want to build even more. So the fourth green sign is when I can get some kind of positive community reaction. This could be through a Reddit post that goes semi-viral in a niche subreddit. It can be a Facebook page. It could be a forum, whatever it is. But you basically want to share what you built. And if you get comments, people praising your efforts, and even some constructive criticisms where people are suggesting some good additions to your directory, these are all solid things to look out for. While this is a great sign, I think this alone doesn't necessarily mean I'm willing to go and spend more time and effort building out a directory, especially if I just don't see my website indexing properly and there's basically no traffic coming in from Google Search Console. Those data points and those green flags are definitely more of a priority. Now let's talk about the red flags. These are signs that you should pause, pivot, or just quit the entire directory and move on to your next build. The first one is when you put in real effort to get your on-page SEO on point. You've gone through all the SEO checklists that are everywhere on the internet. You've confirmed that you have internal links, clean URL slugs, header ones with your keyword, all that good stuff. And you're just not ranking for any keywords, let alone the keywords that you want to be ranking for. Pretty much the opposite of the green flags that we were talking about, which is when you don't see indexing in your Google Search Console, you don't see traffic coming in, and there's just no movement happening, or your traffic graph is just slowly decreasing when you still have a relatively new website. And I have a 3-month rule when it comes to directories. If my directory has been published and 3 months have gone by, I don't see any data, I just don't see any movement in general, that's not a good sign. That is when I would highly consider just moving on. It's when I would take another look at the keyword research, the keyword volume, keyword difficulty, and just understand if I missed something when I was vetting this niche. But for the most part, this is a good sign that I am probably just going to focus my efforts on another directory niche completely. So the second red flag is around monetization. Whether or not the monetization efforts that would need to happen for you to succeed is something that you even want, or if just the monetization has its own challenges because the market size is too small, or it's just very difficult to contact the decision maker. All of these kind of applied with this directory, Discover Plasma, that I created around 16 to 17 months ago in 2024. When I first researched this niche, I was pretty confident that I could build a directory that gets some traffic and then create a high ticket offer. And I was half right and half wrong. If we take a look at the analytics for this website grew really, really fast. It indexed quickly. It was getting a bunch of traffic very, very quickly. I didn't really work on it, which is why we see this downturn here. But 46,000 clicks in the last 16 months for what could be a high ticket niche is pretty solid. But then I failed to realize that when it actually came to monetizing, there's only 15 to 20 major plasma donation companies in the US. And that's not that many attempts if someone is disinterested or just flat out says no to my offer. So that was a really big challenge. But the other challenge was that just getting in contact with the decision maker behind these massive companies was very hard. These companies can have anywhere between 100 to 5,000 employees. So just getting to that one decision maker who would purchase a featured listing is very, very difficult. And the last problem that I failed to recognize with this directory was that plasma donation companies don't have a lead problem. In fact, there's oftentimes 1 to 3 hour waits because there's so much demand. That's just not something that they would be interested in. So if my offer was built around featured listings because then they would get more leads, that's not really solving their biggest pain point. And so I just didn't realize that when I first built this. But again, these are good lessons and hopefully you don't run into the same issues. Now, does that mean that this is an absolute loser? I don't think so. I think there's a path where I can continue building this directory, make a name for myself, and ultimately slowly start to build that reputation and relationship with those plasma companies. But that's when I have to ask myself, am I willing to go and continue building backlinks, spending money, time to basically get to the front page of Google for this competitive keyword? And what is the percentage likelihood that even if I am on the front page, I could create an offer that these plasma donation companies would even be interested in? For me, the answer is no. I don't think it's impossible to win in this space, but I do think that the workload versus the potential payout is just not worth it for me. And that's when I would kind of pivot or just work on another project, which is why I have just left this directory here basically untouched for many, many months, and it's just passively earning like a couple $100s a month. I think this concept of knowing what needs to happen for your directory to succeed and knowing that you're not really willing to do that work is actually a pretty good reason to either pivot or just quit the project entirely. And when I say this, I'm specifically thinking about the people who have 5 to 10,000 monthly visitors who have struggled to monetize their directory. This is really common with lead generation directories because the nature of these directories tend to be a B2C front-facing offer where your directory is trying to help consumers make a decision around a product or service, but your offer on the back end, the thing that's going to make you money, is B2B. So what that requires is for you to go and basically do outbound sales, whether that's email, whether that's calling people. If you look at any directory that's doing really well with lead generation, they almost always have some outbound team dedicated to just reaching out to local businesses to pitch their featured listings or whatever offer that they have. So if you're not willing to go out and do that salesmanship, then that is going to be kind of challenging. And you have to ask yourself why you started directories in the first place. Now, the third sign that I'll probably pivot or just quit the entire directory niche is if the data is too hard to collect. And this could be data that's hard to scrape. In this case, I pulled up the LA Run Clubs directory that I found because I did recently make a video, which was this one right here, where I was really excited to create a website builder for a run club directory that I really wanted to build. The problem is that when I was looking at the different run clubs and how I would actually scrape this data, I found this directory and started to click around. And pretty much all of these run clubs are not on websites. They're not easily scrapable. They're on Instagram accounts. And that makes it very, very difficult because now I'm having to deal with Instagram's anti-scraping measures. So this is just one example, but there are a lot of niches where the data is a little bit challenging to scrape and it requires manual curation. With that said, if you are willing to go and do the manual curation, you end up being one of the only sources of truth, one of the only directories with this information. So if you're willing to do it and you feel like it's worth it, then I guess this isn't a deal breaker. But for me, this is what ultimately led me to kind of move on from the Run Club directory as a whole. I still think this website builder concept where you kind of copy the format of the knot is really smart, but I just don't think that this niche is the best to apply that to. There's quite a few examples where data can be hard to get. I think the next one that comes to mind is any kind of profile-based directory. I pulled up realtor.com, but there are tons of profile-based directories. And the challenge with this is that you can scrape this data and you can even add it to your directory. But because the directory is of individuals and people expect to be able to reach out to people like Alex and Brenda, they won't even know that they're on your directory, which kind of leaves this massive disconnect with if the person will even respond, if Alex or Brenda are even willing to kind of collaborate with your directory. So that is the challenge with a profile-based directory and why it's generally going to be a lot slower to build these types. There's so many really successful ones if you can pull it off. It's just kind of a slow burn. This is another example of hard to scrape data. So you've decided that you want to continue building your directory, but you are not seeing the growth that you want. And so you're asking yourself, what should I do at this point? And I feel like there's a few different camps that you will probably belong to. Some of you will belong in the first camp where you have a directory niche that you really want to continue building and growing, but you're not getting any traffic. Therefore, you can't test out any monetization features or offers. So at this point, you just kind of have to make sure that your on-page SEO is on point. There's no kind of fishy business with any technical SEO issues that are hurting your indexing. If you feel like your on-page SEO is already really solid and you're still not getting any traffic, I would go straight to Ahrefs Webmaster Tools, which is completely free, and just import your Google Search Console. And if you click on this health score here, it will tell you any kind of issues that are hurting your indexation. So here you can see that some of these aren't too consequential, but my meta description is really long for my website, whitescreen.ai. So I would have to go and fix those, although some of them are really, really problematic, and you can see that based on this triangle of death. So you definitely want to fix those first and then resubmit your sitemap and see if that improves your situation. And that leads me to my second camp of people, which is you built a directory, it's already starting to get indexed by Google, you're already getting some traffic, but it's not that significant, maybe less than 1,000 monthly visitors. Well, in that case, I would shift my focus over to link building. This is definitely one of the best uses of your time. And I think this is pretty intimidating for a lot of people, but I do think a lot of people need to start building links because they're stuck at this sub 1,000 monthly visitor range. Take this for example. If we look at whitescreen.ai, I am really barely getting any traffic, and it's a little too early to tell if I'm going to need to build links very, very soon. But based on my 3-month rule that I just talked about earlier in this video, if my traffic stays stagnant for another couple months, then that's a sign for me to start link building. And all I would do, realistically, because I know we all have busy lives, is I would just spend 30 minutes a day, find a competitor that's already doing well, and just look at their backlinks. Reach out to these websites that are already linking to your competitors and just offer $30 or $50 for a link swap. And that's what I would spend 30 minutes a day doing. I think that's really effective. You can go and purchase backlinks from marketplaces if you want, but this is one way to do it that, yes, is manual, but you know exactly what you're going to be getting if you do succeed. If you continue down this path, then eventually someone's going to say yes, and you're going to start getting backlinks, which is awesome because now you have a new data point. You can see the effect of a backlink over the course of the next few months after getting the link and see how it affects your rankings for your target keyword. And so I would repeat this until you feel like your ranking is slowly crawling into the first page and you start to see more traffic coming in, you start to rank for more keywords. This is the most important skill in SEO. And whether or not you get a backlink that you pay for and it helps your rankings or doesn't do anything to your rankings, that's a data point that you can then use to determine whether or not you want to continue competing in this niche or if you want to quit and just move on, build something else. That's why I say when in doubt, go and build backlinks. It's not just for that link itself. It's for all the context that you're going to gain from building every single backlink, and it's going to teach you a whole lot. So that's what I think a lot of us should be doing if you're stuck in sub 1,000 monthly visitor jail. Now that leaves the third camp of directory builders, and this isn't going to be the majority of you. It's probably just a select few of you who are getting 5 to 50,000 monthly visitors, and you're struggling to monetize effectively or at all. And I pulled up my scratch and dent directory because the same problem that I have with this is one that a lot of you are probably facing, which is kind of going back to this concept of a B2C directory on the front end, but on the back end, your offer that makes money is B2B, right? I need to sell to appliance store owners, but those aren't the people browsing this website. In this case, you can always do more outreach, more emails, more calls, and eventually someone will probably buy your featured listing. But one of the vulnerabilities that come with featured listings or selling leads is that if your directory doesn't consistently bring in leads to the people who are paying for these featured listings, then eventually they might just churn anyways. And I think this could be really frustrating because there's a ton of directories selling featured listings and they're doing it successfully. And you might be asking, well, why isn't it working for me? But keep in mind, just because selling leads and featured listings are kind of the default directory monetization strategy, it doesn't mean that that's actually what the business owners want within your niche. Just like the lesson that I learned building discoverplasma.com. I was trying to sell featured listings to these centers that had so much demand, it wasn't really a problem for them. I was filling a gap that wasn't a gap. So the question is, if I want to solve this problem of monetization, what should I do? And I think this leads to something that's a little more uncomfortable for a lot of us, but you can simply take 30 minutes out of your day and call your local businesses. And the idea is that you want to call them to understand what their biggest pain point is. I thought about this after listening to one of my favorite podcasts, My First Million, and I was listening to this episode, Ideas That Sound Illegal But Print Money Anyways. And this guy right here, Sheil Monat, hopefully I'm saying that right. He was talking about this company that all they do is help lawn care companies give quotes faster. The idea is that if you're someone shopping around for lawn care and you get an instant quote for a company, just a fast response, then you're much more likely to actually purchase their service. And this whole company is dedicated to helping lawn care companies give customers instant quotes. So taking a step back, we always just assume all these businesses want are more leads and more customers, which is probably true to an extent. But there are probably so many other problems that the business owners in your niche are facing that may even be bigger than their lead generation problem. So why not just give them a call? You can even use some tactics like, hey, I'm just starting out as an entrepreneur. I want to be able to help businesses like yours to have 3 minutes, 5 minutes of your time. You can pull the student card and say, hey, I'm a student trying to learn about business. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? The point is to talk to those business owners who will be your customers and understand what types of pain points that they're actually thinking about, like which ones are top of mind, and then ask yourself if you can create an offer that solves that solution. It's one of those things that's just so simple, a lot of us overlook it, but I think a couple conversations and you have a lot more data to actually drive your monetization strategy. And I would do this until I have so much data and so much evidence that, yeah, this is clearly a problem affecting all the appliance store owners. Maybe it's a micro SaaS that I can go and vibe code. Maybe it's some marketing stuff that they want. Then you can decide if you want to sell marketing services. And this is the type of stuff that drives creative monetization, which is what you need at this point. If you already have the traffic and you're just not seeing results, you need to start testing different things, but you don't want to do it aimlessly. You want to do it with some kind of evidence or direction. You know, I have a lot of these one-on-one calls, and I never try to discourage anyone from building a directory in a niche that they're passionate about or they really believe in, because sometimes they should just go and do it. But my job, in my opinion, is to try to give you the blind spots that I have learned the hard way. And so hopefully you can kind of use this as a guide, not as a hard rule set, because there are exceptions. And I have talked to people who are building in very difficult niches, and their unfair advantage allows them to keep building. Maybe they have connections with local businesses in a very competitive niche, and they can get backlinks from them because they're just a text away. There's all sorts of nuances when it comes to whether you should continue or quit a directory. But at the end of the day, I think it's more just about how many directories can you start and finish and extract lessons from that you can carry with you to future projects. So I hope you learned something. Thanks so much for watching. Always grateful for your support. And with that, I'll catch you in another video. See ya.